Hello there! Welcome to Skeleton Key Productions. I'm Crime Goes Kokon. Let's get into the video. Today's video we're asking the question of what if Ireland united? Now, before we can get into what if Ireland united, we have to first of all ask the question, why is it divided? So just for a little bit of context, we're going to go through some of the history of it. So in the 16th and 17th century, the British kings decided that they were going to kill two birds with one stone. So what they had was this situation. You had people living on the border between Scotland and England, and they were very rebellious people, very warlike. They used to do raids across the thing, right? And if you're trying to unify the two kingdoms, it's probably not the best idea to have people warring with each other on your border. And on the other side, you had people in the province of Ulster in the north of Ireland, and basically these people were also some of the most rebellious people. So what these people decided was, right, if we take these people from the English-Scottish border and settle them in Ireland, in Ulster, within these so-called Ulster plantations, then we can kill two birds with one stone, because we can have Ulster settled by people who are Protestant and people who are loyal to the crown, and they will be able to suppress the people of Ulster. So this is a recipe for long-lasting peace and prosperity, and everyone just getting on and holding hands in kumbaya, right? Probably not the best idea to have the most rebellious people of Britain living alongside the most rebellious people of Ireland. So this is essentially what ended up happening. So fast forward a few centuries, you end up having a situation where it got to 1912 and the people of Ireland were pushing for home rule. However, the people of Northern Ireland, the Protestants in Northern Ireland, they were very much opposed to this. They wanted direct rule from Britain, and they didn't want to have Irish home rule, because Irish home rule, in their eyes, meant the first step toward Irish independence. And if you had Irish independence, you'd have a situation where the majority of Ireland is Catholic, and they would be a minority, and their rights would be trampled on as they so thought. And so you had the so-called Ulster Covenant, in which this was signed not just in ink but in blood, in which it said that the people of Ulster would never submit to rule from Rome, and that they would always remain as being a loyal British subject. And to show just how serious they were, they set up militias and they acquired a German weapon, because obviously this was the prelude to World War I, and the Germans were trying to support any kind of enemies of Britain. And so in 1914, on the eve of war, you had a situation where you had people in Ireland who wanted more autonomy, and then people in the north of Ireland saying, literally over our dead body. So World War I happened, and domestic policies were kind of put on the back burner for a while. However, in 1916, you had the so-called Easter Rising, in which you had Irish nationalists rising up against the British government in Dublin, and so they tried to set up an Irish Republic. Now this republic was, very short-lived. It was very brutally crushed. The British sent in tanks and guns and artillery and stuff, right, to crush it. However, the reprisals, against the Irish nationalists by the British Army were very, very brutal. The executions, the destruction of property, etc., led to a huge wave of outrage, across the whole of Ireland. So whereas people before had wanted to remain within the British Empire, but had, just wanted a little bit more autonomy, now people were very much in favour of Ireland becoming united, and these people who led the Easter Rising were seen as martyrs for the cause of Irish nationalism. So when it came to the election of 1918, as you can see on the map here, the vast majority of Ireland voted for Sinn Fein, which was and is still the prominent party of Irish nationalism and of Irish unity. However, as we can see on the map here, there are many people in the north of Ireland who did not vote for this party. And so what the British government decided was that for a temporary amount of time, they would divide north from south, right? So it would take 6 of the 9 counties of Ulster and basically split that off from the rest of Ireland, and this would be referred to as Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland would always, in their eyes, be guaranteed a Protestant majority. Now, even in this election of 1918, when they drew these borders, it was the thing of, first of all, it was temporary. They didn't expect it to last as long as it did. And second of all, they didn't take into consideration the fact that even at that time, of the 6 counties, 2 of them had Catholic majorities, and Catholic majorities which wanted to be part of this new island. So even then, it was the thing of these borders didn't actually reflect the situation that was there on the ground. A much better representation would have been something along the kind of line that you can see there. But nonetheless, the Irish fought for independence, and in 1922, the British said, right, okay, you win, you can have 26 of the 32 counties of Ireland but these 6 counties in Northern Ireland, they're going to remain British. So 1922, Ireland gets its independence, but Northern Ireland remains part of the UK. And for the next 50 or so years, you have a situation where they have gerrymandering, in which the political borders of Northern Ireland are drawn in such a way as to deny the Catholics any kind of representation. And what ends up happening basically is a disenfranchisement of Catholic voters in Northern Ireland. And so over these kind of 50-year period, people became more and more fed up with this. And it coincides with, in America, you had like the civil rights movement in the 60s. And so by 1969, you have uprisings in Northern Ireland, right, amongst the Catholic community. Most notably with the Battle of the Bogside in Derry/Londonderry, in which people in the Catholic communities there rose up against like the British Army and stuff. And then a few years later, you had the notorious Bloody Sunday massacre. And so again, in Derry/Londonderry, you had peaceful protesters protesting against like kind of the suppression of their rights. And the British army basically came in and massacred the people there. And actually, I've been to Derry/Londonderry myself, and I've seen, even to this day, you can still see like the holes in some of the walls in that community from when the soldiers like were spraying into the crowds. And if you go to that city, definitely check out the museum that they have there in honour of that event, and also like, just the Troubles in general. It's really fascinating history. And so all of this basically triggered what became known as the Troubles. And this is a civil war which was mainly in Northern Ireland, but also spilled over into the Republic and also into mainland Britain. So this was a series of assassinations, shootings, bombings. Even the Prime Minister of Britain, Margaret Thatcher, in 1984, was there was an attempted assassination attempt in which she was almost blown up by an IRA bomb. Yeah, and just out of interest, I'm very much into films, and I'm actually a script writer, and I've actually written a script which is basically a Romeo and Juliet kind of situation, but set in Belfast in this year of 1984, surrounding the events of this attempted assassination. So in future, hopefully I aim to, get that film out, and hopefully people kind of see it and stuff. So yeah, definitely stay tuned for when I'm doing the film reviews and stuff. This channel is going to go a lot more into like films and stuff. But anyway, enough of a kind of like shameless plug. Let's get back onto the history. So after almost a generation of the Troubles, people in Northern Ireland just wanted peace. And so in 1998, you had the Good Friday Agreement, in which both sides came together and agreed on peace. But some of the things that they agreed on was that people in Northern Ireland had a right to self-identify with whatever nationality they wanted. So people in Northern Ireland, if they felt British, could have a British passport, and if they felt Irish, they could have an Irish passport. And so as a result, regardless of what community you were from, you were still being represented in some sort of way. And also, one of the provisions within the Good Friday Agreement was that regardless of whether the British government wanted it or not, so this separates it from the situation with Scotland, where, if Scotland wants independence, it has to go and beg the British government. In this Good Friday Agreement, it said that as soon as a majority of people in Northern Ireland show evidence of wanting there to be a border poll, the British government, with the Northern Irish Secretary, is honour bound and legally bound, not just by British law, but also by international law, to allow there to be a border poll, to allow there to be a referendum on Irish unification. And so nothing really happened much for the next 18 years or so. Everything kind of just trundled along. People were relatively happy with the kind of situation. Yes, obviously some people opposed the Good Friday Agreement, etc. But by and large, things kind of just trundled on. However, in 2016, as we discussed in the previous video, Brexit happened, and this really caused a schism within Northern Ireland, and we can clearly see it on some of the maps here. So the Protestants by 60% voted to leave, and the Catholics by 85% voted to remain. And this is because obviously the Republic of Ireland is within the EU, and so they wanted to have closer ties to the rest of the EU, whereas people who are British nationalists, they're very much tied up within the Union and within other aspects of British nationalism, and so they thought it'd be much better to stay within a United Kingdom which was separate from the EU. And just to illustrate the impact that Brexit has had on the debate within Northern Ireland, we can see this, right? So this is an opinion poll taken by Lucid Talk in late 2018, and we can see 3 different scenarios. Now, the withdrawal deal that is being mentioned here is the old Theresa May one. So the one that ended up being agreed by Boris Johnson had slight differences, but let's just use that as a kind of benchmark. So we could see with Theresa May's deal, and this basically had a border down the Irish Sea. we can see that 48% of people were in favour of staying within the UK, and only 48% of people wanting to join the rest of Ireland. So it kind of split 50-50. Now we can compare the situation of what it would have been like if it had been a no-deal Brexit, yeah, so a hard Brexit in which there is no like a free trade agreement with the British and the EU. In this scenario, we can see that 42% of people would have wanted to remain within the UK, but then 55% of people would have wanted to unite with Ireland. Now, in the event of there being no Brexit at all, which is what we discussed in the last videos, definitely check that out, we can see a situation in which 60% of people would rather stay within the UK and just 29% of people wanting to join the Republic of Ireland. So you can see just how much of an impact, yeah, Brexit has on Northern Ireland. So 56% of people in Northern Ireland as a whole wanted to remain, and 44% wanted to leave. So you can really see, like, you know, depending on how hard or soft, or if there is a Brexit at all, it is very much dependent on whether people in Northern Ireland want to remain part of the United Kingdom or not. However, it's not as clear cut as that, because as we discussed in our previous video of what if Scotland became independent, so definitely check that out, we can see that actually trade within the UK ends up being very centred around England, far more so than it is with the rest of the EU and the rest of the world. And what I mean by this is this. First of all, the other three constituent nations within the UK are heavily dependent on direct funds that come from the central government in London. So in the case of Northern Ireland, they receive a net figure of about £5 billion from the government. So they are net recipients of government money. So basically this is a transfer of wealth from England each year to Northern Ireland. And this represents about 16% of Northern Ireland's economy. So you can see that if Northern Ireland left the UK, it's not to say that it wouldn't survive, but it's a thing of where they get in 16% of their economy from. Because we can already see that people from the Republic of Ireland are happy with the idea of Irish reunification, but not if it means an increase of taxes. So for instance, as we discussed in our previous video about what if Germany never unified, definitely check that out, you can see that West Germany had to pay an extra tax, and it's cost billions and billions of euros, yeah, to integrate East Germany within West Germany. And even 30 years later, East and West are still not at parity. So people in Northern Ireland are poorer than people in Southern Ireland nowadays, and people in Southern Ireland are like, well, we don't really want to have to foot the bill for this unification. So if it kind of costs us nothing, then fine. If it saves us money, then great. If it costs us money, we're not so great with the idea of unification. And on top of that, you can also see that Northern Ireland is not just dependent on trade with the rest of the UK, but it's heavily dependent on trade with England. So one would expect Northern Ireland and Scotland being closer to each other, that most trade within the UK would be between Northern Ireland and Scotland in that regard. But actually, most of Northern Ireland's trade is actually with England. So as we can see on the kind of broad thing here, yeah, Northern Ireland, in terms of its trade with the EU, 21% of its exports go to the EU, and 34% of its imports come from the EU. However, when we flip this and we see how much it trades with the rest of the UK, we can see that 55% of its exports go to the rest of the UK, and 58% of its imports come from the rest of the UK. And this is why recently there were a bunch of riots within Unionist communities, because they understand that actually having a hard border down the Irish Sea, which separates Northern Ireland from the UK, doesn't actually make much sense here. Like, it makes some sense in terms of having like peace and stuff. You know, you don't want to have a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic, because this might stir up religious and national sentiments and stuff, and you might have a revert to violence. This is what a lot of people were kind of fearing. However, by having this border down the Irish Sea, it means that goods going to and from Northern Ireland and Great Britain are now being hampered. You're now having extra security checks on goods coming through, and the entire process is now becoming complicated in a way which hurts Northern Ireland's trade. So at very least in the short term, it's a thing of, if Ireland became united, these are some of the things which, like, you know, it's not to say that this would never be sorted, it's not to say that it couldn't reorientate its trade, but at least in the short term, you have Northern Ireland, which is heavily dependent on Britain, yeah, both for its trade, both for its government revenue, and yes, so this is something which people who are in favour of Irish unification need to kind of take into consideration. So now that we've dealt with the economics of Irish unification, yeah, now we have to look at some of the demographics. As we've discussed in previous videos, demographics is everything. So there's a so-called demographic time bomb, and we can clearly see it on this map here. So people of Northern Ireland above a certain generation, yeah, they tend to be overwhelmingly Protestant. However, people who are younger in Northern Ireland tend to be overwhelmingly Catholic. And this is as a result of two things. First of all, a higher birth rate amongst Catholics than Protestants. Second of all, there's been a larger influx of people coming from the Republic of Ireland migrating to Northern Ireland, while at the same time you've had an outflow of Protestants from Northern Ireland. So you basically had a situation where Northern Ireland is becoming ever more Catholic and ever less Protestant. So while in 1918 you had a situation where 4 of the 6 counties had Protestant majorities, now it's completely flipped. Now it's just 2 counties of Northern Ireland which have Protestant majorities, and this is in County Antrim and in County Down. And as you can see on the map here, it's very confusing. Yeah, like kind of there's no clear thing of people all tend to live in this county and live in that county. Yes, it looks a little bit like the former Yugoslavia. This looks very much like kind of Bosnia, yeah, where, you know, people are all over the place, yeah. There's kind of balkanization. Try and form some sort of coherent border between this group and that group. You know, like the question of this video probably shouldn't have been what if Ireland unites. It should be a thing of what will happen when it unites, because as we can see here, if the current trends continue, we can already see that there's going to be a majority of people very soon who are going to be in favour of Irish unification. And you can already see from some opinion polls, such as the one from Lord Ashcroft from a few years ago, in which for the first time you are starting to see a majority of people in Northern Ireland being in favour of Irish unification. So obviously this is very much polarised between the Unionist communities and the Nationalist communities, but it still is a situation where, as we can clearly see, it is a question of when this is going to happen. So then the question really comes down to what is to be done with the Protestants in Northern Ireland, right? So obviously there's not going to hopefully be any kind of ethnic cleansing as there might be in some other places. Hopefully it can be sorted in a very civil and like peaceful manner, right? But it's a question of, you know, you have 2 different scenarios. One in which the people of Northern Ireland who are Protestant all decide to migrate to Great Britain. So it's a question, so let's take that first scenario. One, that is going to fundamentally change the politics of wherever they decide to settle, because the people of Northern Ireland are obviously strongly patriotic. They tend to be relatively right wing, and so say for instance they settle in the port city of Liverpool. Liverpool is obviously very pro-Labour, it's very left-wing, it's also very pro-EU. If you had a bunch of people who are, you know, British nationalists, who are right-wing and are anti-EU, and they come and settle in Liverpool, then that completely changes the demographics of Liverpool and the voting pattern of Liverpool. Or say they go to London or Manchester, wherever they go, it's going to have huge impact on like the electoral outcome wherever they go. And say, for instance, that they decide, okay, we don't want to go to England. Let's say that they all decide to go to Scotland. Well, then what does that do for the cause of Scottish independence? So I think within this timeline, we can kind of, it'd be easy to kind of say, well, if Ireland unified, it would strengthen the Scottish independence campaign. However, not necessarily, because if all the people who are Unionists decide to immigrate to Scotland, well, then you've got an extra 1 million people who are, they've already lost one border poll in this scenario, and they're not going to be very happy about losing another one. So Scotland becoming independent, if this kind of mass migration were to happen, not saying obviously it would, but let's for argument's sake say it did. If this mass migration was to happen to Scotland, then it'd be a situation where the politics of Scotland would fundamentally change, and the Unionist cause within Scotland would be much strengthened and the nationalist cause would be greatly weakened. Now let's flip it and let's say that none of the people from Northern Ireland leave, none of the Protestants leave. Well, then what happens to the people who, stay behind and stuff? So obviously the Republic of Ireland is going to expand. Now within certain communities on like the border, it's going to be quite easy for them to integrate. It's just going to be very similar because many of the people there are Irish nationalists already. So certain places it's going to be quite easy for them to just be absorbed. However, many of these places, as we've seen on this map, again, how do you kind of like solve this? So you've got some pockets of Catholics and you've got some pockets of Protestants, and it's like, where do you draw any kind of border or any kind of, but at the same time, the people of Northern Ireland who are Protestants would not want to live under a Republican administration from Dublin. So what do we do? Do Do you give them an autonomous zone? Okay, in which case, where do you draw a border? And again, like, you know, or do we give them an independent state? Yeah, in which case, again, where do you draw the border? And then suppose that you kind of give them none of these things. Well, then within the Irish Dale, I can't pronounce their parliament yet, but their Dale, yeah, you know, are the Unionists always going to just be a thorn in the side of whatever government is there in Dublin, where they basically voting against the interests of the other people in the country? It's a headache, right? Even assuming that there's no violence, which undoubtedly there probably would be a lot of violence if this was to happen. Let's assume that it's all completely peaceful. It still is an incredibly complex political situation in which people of Northern Ireland, you know, it will flip, yeah, it will go from the Catholics being the oppressed minority to the Protestants being the oppressed minority. And this is what the people who signed the Ulster Covenant were afraid of, yeah. They were afraid of this so-called tyranny, yeah, like that from the Catholics, yeah, in which their culture and their rights are being trampled on by this Catholic minority. And yeah, so how do you kind of like ease the tensions of that? How do you kind of bring them into the fold? Or what do you kind of do? Are you happy to just have this kind of rebellious people like kind of living within the north of your country who don't want to be part of you and always going to be kind of thorn on your side? I mean, there's no easy answer. And I think that whatever side you kind of take on the issue, if Ireland, or rather when Ireland becomes unified, all of these things are going to have to be taken into consideration, because if they're not taken into consideration, then you probably will end up with a violent situation. And no one wants a resumption of the Troubles. No one wants a resumption of violence on the island of Ireland. So yeah, so with that being said, yeah, there's a lot to kind of get through. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed that video. And yeah, I'd like to see in the comment section what people want. Please don't be horrible, just be nice. Yeah, give your opinion, be respectful. There's obviously different sides to this. We don't want anyone talking kind of any kind of sectarian stuff about all these people. No, cut. Like, just don't do that. So in a respectful way, put your opinions in the comment section of how this can be dealt with in a peaceful, like, democratic kind of way, right? And so if you like that video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe. When you've subscribed, hit the little bell icon. That way you stay updated with all our latest videos. And also share amongst your friends and stuff. Yeah, sharing is caring. Spread the love, spread my videos, right? Because then more people can see this great content and also watch a lot of our other videos as well. And yeah, the next video is going to be a video which was requested by one of the fans. So this is going to be on what if Quebec became independent. So again, if people have any ideas for alternative histories, get them in now. We've almost run out of the alternative history series, and that's because, you know, I'm going to be moving on to film reviews soon. You know, as I've mentioned earlier, I have written several scripts for films, and I kind of want to get into like the film industry at some point. So that's kind of where the focus for this channel is going to kind of head towards in the next few months. So definitely kind of get any ideas in, put them in the comment section. If they're sensible ideas and I think they make sense, then I will do a video on them. So yeah, with that being said, have a great day and bye.